Captain Elias Thorne sat at the edge of his bunk, staring at the small metallic box in his hands. It was not a weapon, nor a piece of advanced technology, but a simple, handcrafted terrarium. Inside, a tiny world of soil, moss, and a few small insects thrived under a thin glass dome. To most humans, it would seem ordinary, even boring. But to Elias, it held a story, a memory of home, and a piece of himself. Elias was not just any human. He was an explorer, one of the few humans allowed to travel beyond the Solar Alliance borders. His missions often took him to places no human had ever seen, gas giants with swirling violet storms, asteroid belts teeming with minerals, and ancient derelict ships that seemed to float in endless space like forgotten dreams. Yet nothing in all his journeys could prepare him for the message he had received that morning. It had come directly from the interstellar court of the Zolari Dominion, a civilization so advanced and enigmatic that even the Council of Stellar Peace treated their actions with caution. The message was short and formal. Captain Elias Thorne, the Zolari Princess Lyra requests your presence at the Dominion Palace. Your attendance is required. Travel arrangements will be provided. Elias had read it several times, hoping that perhaps his tired eyes were imagining the words. But the message was real, and it carried weight. Humans were respected by some, feared by others, and mostly misunderstood by most alien civilizations. The Zolari were considered untouchable in reputation, brilliant, graceful, and distant. To be personally invited by their princess was almost unheard of. He sighed, placing the terrarium back on the bunk beside him. He had intended it as a small, personal gift, something from Earth, something that spoke of simplicity and life. It was a gesture, a tiny window into human creativity and care. He never imagined it would be the thing he carried to meet a princess from another world. Packing his belongings for the journey, Elias could not help but feel a mixture of excitement and anxiety. His ship, the Aurora's Edge, was ready, fueled, and stocked for the long voyage. Still, traveling to the heart of the Zolari Dominion was not like any ordinary diplomatic trip. The Zolari had their own customs, their own language, and, most importantly, their own ways of seeing the universe. As he prepared, Elias thought of the terrarium again. It was simple, yes, but it was alive. It was small, fragile, and full of movement. Moss and tiny flowers grew beside miniature insects crawling through the soil. A few blades of grass bent gently toward the light source inside the dome. To Elias, it represented Earth itself, a small planet filled with life, struggling, thriving, and beautiful in its imperfections. Simple gifts, he muttered to himself, sometimes carry the biggest meaning. The journey to the Zolari Dominion was long. Days of light-speed travel through the void left him staring at the stars, reflecting on humanity and its place in the universe. He had met aliens before, but most encounters were formal, distant, and often cold. The Zolari, he had heard, valued beauty and intellect above all. They had eyes that saw patterns in nature and the cosmos that humans could barely understand. How would they view something as simple as a terrarium? Elias shook his head and chuckled quietly. They might think it's nothing, or maybe they'll understand everything. When the Aurora's Edge entered the outer perimeter of Zolari space, Elias was struck by the sight. Massive structures floated above a gas giant, enormous towers of light and metal that seemed to defy gravity itself. The palace of Princess Lyra was the largest, a shimmering crystal structure that reflected the colors of the swirling storms below. Other ships, elegant and unlike anything human engineers had ever designed, hovered around the palace, some seemingly suspended without engines or thrusters. Docking was simple. The Zolari were precise and efficient. When the airlock opened, Elias felt a rush of unfamiliar air, not just the physical environment, which had been adjusted for human comfort, but an aura of elegance and history, as if the palace itself was alive and observing him. He was escorted through halls that glimmered with soft, shifting light. The walls seemed to hum faintly, a subtle vibration that resonated in his chest. Creatures of different shapes and sizes walked among the corridors, some with wings that caught the light like crystals, others with elongated limbs that moved with perfect grace. Every being seemed to move with purpose, yet none rushed. The air was filled with a quiet anticipation. Finally, he was led to a chamber overlooking the gas giant below. The room was vast, with walls that curved like the inside of a pearl. In the center, standing with a calm but commanding presence, was Princess Lyra. She was unlike anything Elias had imagined. Her form shimmered in gentle hues, reflecting the light of the palace. And her eyes, large and expressive, seemed to hold entire constellations within them. Elias bowed, feeling suddenly very human, very ordinary. He extended the terrarium toward her, careful not to spill the soil or disturb the delicate plants inside. "It's nothing much," he began. "Just a little gift from my home. I thought, maybe you'd like to see a small piece of Earth." Lyra tilted her head, regarding the terrarium with quiet curiosity. Her gaze was intense, yet not intimidating. Elias could not read her thoughts, but he felt that she was truly seeing the gift. Not just the object, but the care and thought behind it. For a moment, the room was silent. Elias's heart beat loudly in his chest. He expected a polite nod, a quiet acknowledgement, perhaps even dismissal. But instead, Princess Lyra's fingers hovered over the terrarium, and a gentle, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. "You brought life," she said softly, her voice musical, echoing lightly in the chamber. "And life is a rare gift in our courts." Elias blinked, unsure how to respond. He had expected intrigue, curiosity, maybe even confusion. But he did not expect that simple phrase to feel like such a profound acknowledgement. She stepped closer, and Elias noticed something remarkable. The terrarium seemed to react. The small flowers inside lifted slightly, as if reaching toward her presence. Tiny insects moved with more energy, and the soil shimmered faintly under her gaze. It was subtle, almost magical, and Elias could barely believe what he saw. "You see," she continued, "we have spent centuries creating wonders, mastering technology, bending the universe to our will. And yet, life in its simple form often teaches more than anything we invent." Elias felt a warmth he had never experienced in an alien court. Here, in a place of immense power and beauty, his humble gift, his small, ordinary piece of Earth, had been recognized, not as a curiosity, but as something alive, something meaningful. He could only smile, a little awkwardly, unsure if words could capture the surge of relief and pride he felt. For years, humans had been underestimated, dismissed, and even ignored. Here, on the edge of the galaxy, in front of one of the most powerful beings in the universe, he felt that humanity's quiet resilience had been seen and appreciated. Lyra's attention returned to the terrarium, her fingers barely brushing the glass. "You understand," she said softly, "that even the smallest forms of life carry lessons we cannot ignore. You have reminded us that beauty does not always come from complexity. Sometimes it comes from care, attention, and the courage to nurture." Elias swallowed, feeling an unexpected lump in his throat. He had only hoped that she might appreciate the gesture. He had not anticipated that it would resonate so deeply, that it would touch the very heart of the Zolari court. As the first part of his journey with Princess Lyra unfolded, Elias realized that this meeting was more than a formal visit. It was a bridge between worlds, a moment where humanity could be understood not through power or technology, but through empathy, care, and simple acts of creation. The terrarium, small and unassuming, had become a symbol. And Elias, a human explorer from a distant planet, stood at the center of something extraordinary, a moment that could change perceptions, challenge assumptions, and perhaps, in its own quiet way, make the universe a little more aware of the subtle power of humanity. For the first time in his life, Elias felt that being human and perfect, simple and resilient, was not a limitation. It was a gift, and in that palace, floating above a gas giant, surrounded by wonders beyond imagining, he understood that sometimes the smallest things could make the biggest impact. Elias stood in the grand hall of the Zolari Palace, his eyes wide in awe. The space was unlike anything he had ever seen. Walls curved and soft, luminous arcs, glowing with colors that shifted like liquid rainbows. Light seemed to have no source, yet it illuminated every corner without glare. The floor appeared to float above a vast chasm, revealing glimpses of the swirling gas giant far below around him. Creatures of every imaginable shape moved gracefully. Some had long, delicate limbs that bent at impossible angles. Others had wings made of translucent material that shimmered like glass. Every being seemed in harmony with the space itself, moving as though guided by a silent rhythm that Elias could neither hear nor understand. A Zolari attendant approached, bowing slightly. "Captain Thorne," the being said in flawless galactic common, "the princess will see you shortly. Please, follow me." Elias nodded, trying to maintain his composure. Every step he took felt like entering another world entirely. He followed the attendant along a winding walkway, passing by courtiers engaged in quiet conversation. Their voices were soft, musical, almost like a song in the background. Occasionally, one would glance at him, curious, but never intrusive. Elias realized that, unlike human courts, there was no arrogance here, no constant need to assert status. Finally, they arrived at a chamber overlooking the palace gardens. Enormous terraces filled with floating plants and bioluminescent flowers. Streams of liquid light curved through the air, feeding the vegetation in a way that defied gravity and expectation. Elias could not help but pause and stare. Even among all the wonders of the universe he had seen, this was extraordinary. Princess Lyra appeared from a side doorway, gliding rather than walking. Her presence commanded attention without demanding it. Her shimmering form reflected the light in the room, and her eyes, wide and bright, seemed to take in every detail of Elias and the terrarium he held. "You have brought life with you," she said, her voice soft but carrying a resonance that made it feel like it filled the entire chamber. "And life is always precious, no matter where it comes from," Elias bowed. "It is small, Your Highness, but it is from my home. I wanted to show you a little piece of Earth." Lyra extended a delicate hand, and for the first time, Elias noticed the subtle energy that seemed to radiate from her fingers. When she hovered them near the terrarium, the moss inside shifted gently toward her touch. Tiny insects paused, as if sensing her presence. Elias's breath caught. He had seen strange phenomena in the universe, but this was personal. "It responds to life," he whispered. "Yes," Lyra said. "All life seeks connection. Even yours, fragile and distant, has meaning here." She paused, examining him more closely. "Tell me, human, do you understand the importance of small things?" Elias smiled nervously. "I think I try to. We humans often believe that big actions matter most, but sometimes the smallest gestures carry the deepest meaning." She nodded, as though she had expected no other answer. "Perhaps that is why you have come. Perhaps the Dominion needed to remember that truth." Elias felt a mix of pride and disbelief. Humans were often seen as primitive, unpredictable, or naive by advanced civilizations. Yet here, in the heart of the Zolari court, a single human, himself, had managed to touch the attention of a princess. Lyra led him further into the gardens, where terraces floated high above the swirling storms of the gas giant. Streams of light wound between plants, feeding them as they glowed with vibrant colors. Insects that Elias could not name hovered around, yet none ever collided with him. He felt like an intruder in a world made entirely of harmony and balance. As they walked, Lyra spoke of her people. The Zolari have spent centuries mastering knowledge, exploring stars, creating beauty. Yet in our pursuit of perfection, we often forget that life is messy, unpredictable, and beautiful because of it. Your gift reminds us of what we overlook: the quiet power of care, the courage to nurture, and the simple joy of observing life. Elias listened, fascinated. He had expected diplomacy, perhaps discussions of trade or alliances, but not this. Not this deep, thoughtful conversation about life itself. He realized that, in some ways, the Zolari were more advanced not because of technology or strength, but because they valued understanding. They reached a terrace overlooking a waterfall of liquid light. The energy cascaded down into glowing pools, illuminating flowers that shifted colors with each ripple. Lyra turned to him. "You see, human, beauty can be found in the smallest things and the grandest spectacles alike." Yet most of my people are blind to the simple forms of life. They do not understand that even a tiny seed, given care and attention, can change perspectives. Elias nodded slowly. I think I understand. The terrarium, it's just a small part of Earth, but it shows that life is valuable, even in its simplest forms. Exactly, Lyra said. She gestured to the terrarium. And in that, you have taught us something we had almost forgotten. At that moment, a group of Zolari courtiers approached. Elias recognized some from the Carters, but he had never seen them so close. They were tall, elegant, and otherworldly, with eyes that seemed to shimmer like starlight. Each carried an air of intelligence and observation, and Elias felt a surge of anxiety. Princess Lyra, one of the courtiers said in melodic tones, you have invited a human to present a gift. How unusual. Lyra smiled faintly. It is unusual, yes, but there's wisdom and simplicity, and this human has reminded us of that. She gestured toward Elias. Observe the terrarium, and understand why even small life matters. The courtiers leaned in, examining the tiny ecosystem. To Elias's surprise, some of them gasped softly, while others murmured in tones he did not understand. The smallest flowers inside the terrarium seemed to glow more brightly, as if reacting to their attention. Insects moved in graceful patterns, drawing invisible lines in the air. Elias realized that the gift had done more than he imagined. It was no longer just a symbol of Earth, but a demonstration of life's subtle magic. You see, Lyra continued, addressing the courtiers, this is not just a gift. It is a lesson. Even the smallest beings, given care and attention, can influence perspectives and inspire wonder. Elias felt a warmth in his chest. He had not expected this. Humans were often underestimated in the galaxy, thought to be clever but insignificant. Yet here, in a court of unimaginable sophistication, his simple gift had captured attention and respect. The courtiers exchanged glances, some smiling faintly, others nodding. Elias realized that this was the beginning of something greater. His role was no longer just an explorer or visitor. He was a bridge between worlds, showing that humanity had unique value beyond technology or power. Lyra turned to him once more. Tell me, Captain Thorne, have humans always cared for such small wonders? Elias chuckled softly. Some do, Princess. Many overlook them, thinking only of progress or profit. But there are always those who see the importance of life, even in its smallest forms. We call it curiosity, care, responsibility, and that is why you have brought this gift, Lyra said, smiling. Because you understand what many of us forget, that even the tiniest forms of life have meaning. For the first time, Elias felt truly seen, not just as a human, not just as an explorer, but as someone whose values, choices, and perspective could matter to others. Even in a court of beings so advanced they had mastered entire galaxies. As the day progressed, Lyra introduced him to more of her people. Each encounter revealed a new layer of the Zolari world: scholars, who studied the movements of stars like poets, engineers who created floating cities that pulsed with energy, artists who painted with light itself. Elias listened and learned, but he never forgot the terrarium in his hands. It had opened the door to all of this. By the end of the day, as the light from the gas giant shifted to soft shades of violet and gold, Elias stood with Lyra on a high terrace overlooking the floating gardens and glowing waterfalls. You have changed our perspective today, she said quietly. Not with power, not with wealth, not with knowledge alone. With care, with attention, and with the courage to bring something small and simple into our world. Elias smiled. I never expected that a tiny piece of Earth would have so much impact. Lyra's gaze met his. Sometimes, the smallest things carry the greatest lessons. Remember that, human. Remember that even the simplest acts can inspire change. And in that moment, Elias realized that his journey was only beginning. The Court of Wonders had welcomed him not because of human technology, skill, or ambition, but because he had shown something more precious, the human heart, capable of empathy, care, and understanding. It was a lesson he would carry with him always, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, The smallest gestures could make the largest difference. Elias woke early the next day, his mind still buzzing from the previous day's encounters. The terrarium sat on a pedestal in the center of his chamber, catching the soft morning light from the enormous windows of the Zolari Palace. The moss inside seemed greener, the tiny flowers more vibrant, and even the insects moved with a rhythm that felt almost synchronized. As though anticipating the day ahead, he had thought the terrarium was just a simple gift, a symbol of Earth's resilience. Yet, after seeing Princess Lyra's reaction and the curiosity it sparked among the courtiers, Elias began to wonder if it had a life of its own, or at least a way of connecting with those who looked upon it. Breakfast was brought to him by a floating Zolari servant, a slender being with semi-transparent wings that refracted light into subtle rainbows. Elias had learned not to be startled by such beings. In this palace, everything was extraordinary. As he ate, he watched the terrarium carefully, feeling an unusual mix of anticipation and anxiety. He had no idea what the day would bring. Not long after, Lyra herself arrived. Her presence seemed to make the room lighter, though it was hard to explain why. Elias felt a familiar warmth in his chest, a mix of nervousness and hope. As she approached the terrarium, "You slept well, I hope?" she asked, her voice soft like a melody. "Yes, Princess," Elias replied. "Thank you for asking." Lyra nodded and looked at the terrarium for a long moment. Then, she did something Elias had not expected. She reached out, her hand hovering just above the glass. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the tiny flowers inside began to bloom. Their petals opened in perfect symmetry, radiating soft, glowing light. The moss seemed to stretch upward as if reaching for her energy, and the insects moved in patterns that resembled a delicate dance. Elias's mouth went dry. He had seen flowers bloom before, but never like this, and never with such immediate response to someone's presence. "Princess, it's reacting to you," he said, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. Lyra smiled. Though it was not a playful smile, it was filled with understanding and wonder. "It is not just me," she said. "It is life itself responding. Life recognizes those who honor it." Elias felt a shiver of excitement. The courtiers, who had entered quietly behind her, gasped softly. Some whispered to each other in the melodic Zolari language, their tones rising and falling like music. He realized that the terrarium was doing more than reacting. It was demonstrating something fundamental to life itself, that attention, care, and respect could create harmony, even in miniature form. One of the senior courtiers, an elegant being with long, silver tendrils that seemed to float independently, stepped closer. "Princess," the being said, voice calm but curious, "what is this? How can a mere human gift evoke such response?" Lyra gestured toward Elias. "It is not merely a gift. It is a reminder. The human has captured something we often overlook, the power of nurturing, and the recognition of life's value, no matter how small. This terrarium embodies patience, observation, and care, qualities our civilization sometimes forgets in pursuit of perfection." The senior courtier tilted its head, considering. "So, this is not a trick, not an illusion?" Elias shook his head. "No, it's real, just very small. Very fragile, but alive." Lyra looked at him with gentle approval. "Exactly, and in its smallness, it teaches more than any machine, any invention, any vast project we have ever created." As the day progressed, word of the terrarium's reaction spread through the palace. Courtiers came in groups, taking turns observing the tiny ecosystem. Each time someone approached, the terrarium seemed to respond in unique ways. Flowers shifted toward them. Insects moved in intricate patterns, and the moss adjusted its form. Elias noticed that some of the courtiers appeared thoughtful, some amazed, and some quietly emotional. "It is incredible," one whispered to another. "The human has brought life into our awareness in a way we never imagined." Lyra led Elias to a high balcony overlooking the palace gardens. "Do you see, Captain Thorne?" she asked. "This is the essence of why you were invited. Not for diplomacy, not for strategy, not for politics, but for reminding us what is truly important. The smallest forms of life, when treated with care, carry lessons far beyond their size. Elias nodded slowly, trying to absorb the weight of her words. Humans often felt insignificant in the vastness of space. Entire civilizations had overlooked them, dismissed them, or underestimated their value. Yet here, in this palace of unimaginable beauty and intelligence, the simple act of giving a gift, a small, ordinary gift, had created a ripple that reached hearts and minds alike. He could not help but smile as he watched Princess Lyra extend her hand toward the terrarium again. This time, the effect was even more dramatic. The insects arranged themselves into intricate shapes, patterns that almost resembled constellations. The flowers glow-pulsed gently, as if keeping time with some hidden rhythm, and the moss seemed to spread, covering more of the soil in lush green waves. One of the younger courtiers gasped, It is alive in a way we have never seen. It is communicating." Lyra nodded. "Yes, communication does not require words. Life speaks to those who are willing to listen." Elias felt a deep sense of pride, mixed with humility. Humans were often defined by their achievements, their technology, or their dominance. Yet here, his human sensitivity, his ability to care for something fragile and small, had done what no advanced machine or grand invention could. It had touched hearts, inspired reflection, and reminded an entire civilization of what truly mattered. The day passed with countless observations and quiet discussions. Courtiers debated among themselves, not in anger or rivalry, but in thoughtful reflection. Some took notes, some sketched patterns inspired by the terrarium, and some simply stood in awe. Elias realized that his small gift had become a catalyst, a spark of understanding that might influence the Zolari for generations. As evening approached, Lyra asked Elias to sit with her on the balcony, overlooking the glowing gardens below. The air was filled with soft bioluminescent light, the sounds of water like energy flowing through the gardens, and the gentle hum of the palace itself. "You have given us more than a gift," she said quietly. "You have reminded us that life, no matter how small, deserves respect. That attention, care, and empathy can create change in ways we often overlook. This terrarium, it has done what our greatest scholars and inventors could not." Elias shook his head in disbelief. "I only made it because it felt right. I wanted to show a piece of Earth, something alive, something simple." Lyra smiled. "And that is why it works. Complexity is easy. Simplicity is difficult. Most overlook the small things because they seem insignificant, but you have proven that even the smallest act can inspire wonder and understanding." Elias looked down at the terrarium, noticing how it glowed softly in the twilight. He felt a strange connection, not only to the life inside the glass, but also to the palace, the princess, and the beings around him. Somehow, this small object had bridged the gap between worlds, reminding everyone present that life, empathy, and care were universal languages. Lyra's gaze held his for a long moment. "Captain Thorne, you have done more than bring a gift. You have opened our eyes. You have shown that humans, despite your perceived limitations, carry a strength that is both subtle and profound. It is the power of heart, of attention, of care." Elias smiled, humbled. "I never expected this. I thought it was just a small gesture." "Small gestures," Lyra replied, "often carry the biggest meaning." As night fell over the Zolari palace, Elias felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The terrarium had done more than survive its journey across space. It had inspired thought, awakened curiosity, and created a moment of connection that transcended language, species, and culture. For the first time, Elias truly understood the meaning of his role. Humanity was not just explorers or engineers or strategists. Humans were observers, creators, nurturers, and dreamers. And sometimes, the simplest acts, a small gift, a kind gesture, a careful attention to life, could create the most extraordinary impact. As he looked up at Princess Lyra and the glowing gardens below, Elias felt a quiet certainty. This was only the beginning. The terrarium's reaction was more than a miracle. It was a message, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, humanity could shine in ways that no technology or power alone could achieve. And in that palace, floating above a swirling gas giant, Elias realized that the smallest gifts could leave the largest marks. The next morning, the palace of Princess Lyra seemed even more alive than before. The terrarium, now glowing softly on its pedestal, had become the focus of attention for many courtiers. Its subtle responses to life around it fascinated everyone, and its presence reminded the Zolari that sometimes the simplest forms of life carried the deepest lessons. Elias entered the garden terrace, the same place where he had first witnessed the terrarium's reaction. Lyra was waiting, her shimmering form radiating calm energy. Today, however, there was a new excitement in her eyes. "Captain Thorn," she said, smiling. "Yesterday, your gift taught us patience and care. Today, I want you to share something else, your world, your people, your stories." Elias's eyes widened. Sharing Earth's stories with a civilization as advanced as the Zolari? He felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Stories?" he asked. "Yes," Lyra replied. "Humans see the universe differently. You feel, you imagine, you create. Tell us about Earth. Tell us about humans. Share what makes your kind remarkable." Elias nodded slowly, realizing the trust she was placing in him, not through politics, not through technology, but through his perspective, his humanity. He was being asked to influence one of the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. He began with simple stories of Earth's forests and oceans, of mountains that reached into clouds, of deserts that stretched endlessly under the sun. He spoke of human ingenuity, building bridges across rivers, harnessing wind and sun, and reaching the stars themselves. He told tales of cooperation, curiosity, and the small acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. As he spoke, the Zolari listened intently. Some had never heard of such vibrant landscapes, creatures, or emotions. Some tilted their heads, studying his gestures and expressions, trying to understand the depth of feeling behind the words. And every time Elias mentioned the care humans gave to life, the nurturing of plants, the protection of animals, the respect for one another, the terrarium responded, its glow brightening and its small ecosystem moving in subtle harmony. Lyra observed silently, occasionally smiling, clearly proud. "Your stories remind us of something we often forget," she said quietly. "Life is not only about knowledge or creation. It is about connection, understanding, and empathy. Humans may seem small in the galaxy, yet you carry a gift that is rare, the ability to see the extraordinary in the ordinary." Encouraged, Elias moved on to tales of human achievement and creativity. He spoke of music that could make people cry, dance that expressed emotion, and art that captured imagination. He explained how humans created not just for survival, but for joy, for connection, and for meaning. The Zolari courtiers, initially cautious and formal, began to react differently. Some whispered to one another, as though reassessing their understanding of humans. Some moved closer to study the terrarium, noticing how it seemed to respond more vividly with each story. The tiny flowers tilted as if listening, and the insects arranged themselves in new, intricate patterns, forming shapes that mirrored Elias's descriptions. One young Zolari approached hesitantly. "Captain Thorn," the being said, "your people. You speak of small things, yet these small things are powerful." Elias nodded. "Yes, it's easy to overlook them, but small acts, care, attention, creativity, they can change the world. Sometimes, the simplest gestures create the biggest impact." Lyra's eyes sparkled. "And that is why you are here. You remind us that even the most advanced beings can learn from simplicity. Even we, with all our knowledge and power, can be inspired by the small things humans treasure." The day continued with storytelling and discussion. Elias shared tales of human curiosity, from the first explorers who set foot on the moon to the scientists who looked deep into the stars. He spoke of human imagination, the drive to dream, and the courage to pursue ideas that seemed impossible. Each story reinforced the lesson the terrarium had already begun to teach, that life, attention, and care were universal strengths. As the hours passed, the Zolari courtiers became increasingly engaged. They asked questions, some about the physical world of Earth, others about human emotions and creativity. Elias answered as best he could, realizing that he was not just a storyteller, but a teacher. A bridge between two very different civilizations, Lyra guided the discussions carefully, allowing humans and Zolari to interact and learn from one another. Elias noticed that the courtiers were not just listening. They were beginning to see value in perspectives they had once dismissed. The terrarium glowed brighter with each interaction, as if acknowledging the growing understanding between species. By evening, the palace terrace was filled with gentle light and soft hums of energy. Elias had shared stories for hours, and the courtiers had absorbed them with curiosity and awe. Lyra motioned for a pause. "Captain Thorn," she said, "you have done more than entertain us with tales. You have reminded us that life, no matter where it exists, carries meaning. You have shown us that even the smallest world can hold lessons for the largest civilization." Elias smiled, exhausted but proud. "I only wanted to share my world," he said. "I didn't know it could have this effect." Lyra approached him, her eyes bright with sincerity. The effect was inevitable. Humans possess something the Zolari have long overlooked, the ability to see, to feel, and to care. Your gift, both the terrarium and your stories, has reminded us that knowledge alone is not enough. Understanding life requires empathy. Elias glanced at the terrarium. It glowed softly in the dimming light, its tiny ecosystem vibrant and alive. He realized that it was more than a gift now. It was a symbol of connection, of mutual respect, and of humanity's ability to inspire even the most advanced civilizations. One of the senior courtiers stepped forward. "Princess Lyra," the being said, "this human has shown us a new way of thinking. Perhaps we should consider not only our inventions and discoveries, but also the small acts of care that connect us to life itself." Lyra nodded. "Indeed, Captain Thorn, you have reminded us that greatness is not measured only by power or knowledge. It is measured by understanding, by nurturing, and by the courage to value life in all its forms." Elias felt a warmth spread through him. Humans were often underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. Yet here, on a distant world, his stories and his small gift had begun to bridge the gap between civilizations. He had proven that humanity's strength lay not only in technology or strategy, but in its heart, its creativity, and its care. As night fully fell, Elias and Lyra stood together, overlooking the glowing gardens. The palace seemed to pulse with a gentle life of its own, reflecting the connection that had begun between humans and Zolari. "Captain Thorn," Lyra said softly, "you have done more than I could have imagined. Your presence, your stories, and your gift have begun a new chapter for the Dominion. Perhaps, in time, humans and Zolari will learn from one another, not through conquest or control, but through respect, curiosity, and empathy." Elias nodded, humbled by the responsibility and honor. "I hope so, Princess. That is all I ever wanted, to share, to connect, to help others understand us." Lyra smiled. "And you have succeeded. Humanity's heart is stronger than many believe, and today you have proven it. The terrarium, your stories, your care, all of it is part of what makes your species remarkable." Elias looked at the glowing terrarium one last time before leaving the terrace. It had begun as a small, fragile gift, but it had grown into something far greater, a bridge between worlds, a reminder that even the simplest forms of life and the simplest acts of kindness could inspire wonder and change. As he prepared to rest for the night, Elias felt a quiet certainty. His journey with the Zolari was far from over, but he had already begun to leave a mark, not through force, not through invention, but through empathy, creativity, and the human spirit. And in the palace high above the gas giant, humanity's quiet strength was beginning to shine across the stars. The palace of Princess Lyra shimmered under the soft glow of the gas giant below. Elias stood on the balcony, looking at the terraces filled with floating gardens and streams of light. His journey among the Zolari had been unlike anything he could have imagined. The terrarium, now a symbol far greater than he had ever intended, rested on a pedestal nearby, glowing gently as if acknowledging the presence of its creator. Over the past days, Elias had shared stories, taught lessons, and inspired curiosity. He had witnessed the court's reaction to a simple gift and understood the power of empathy, creativity, and care. And now, as his visit neared its conclusion, he felt a mix of pride, humility, and wonder. Princess Lyra approached, her movement graceful, yet filled with purpose. "Captain Thorne," she said, her voice calm but resonant, "you have given us more than a gift. You have reminded us of truths we had long forgotten. Humanity is often underestimated, yet you have shown that your kind carries a power beyond technology or knowledge. It is the power of heart, of attention, of respect for life itself." Elias bowed slightly. "I never imagined my small gift would have this effect, Princess. I only wanted to show a piece of Earth, a tiny symbol of life." Lyra's smile was gentle. "And yet, in its smallness, it has changed perspectives. You have reminded us that even the most advanced civilizations can learn from simplicity, that even the smallest forms of life carry lessons that resonate across worlds." The court had gathered again, this time in the grand hall where the light seemed to dance along the walls. Courtiers of every kind, tall beings with floating limbs, winged creatures that refracted light like prisms, and others whose forms Elias could not describe, had come to witness the culmination of his visit. Each had observed the terrarium's reactions, listened to his stories, and reflected quietly on what they had learned. Lyra turned to the court. "Behold what a human has brought, not only a gift, but a reminder. Even in its smallest form, life teaches lessons that we often overlook." The terrarium shimmered in response, the tiny flowers opening and closing rhythmically, the insects moving in intricate, synchronized patterns. It was as if the entire miniature ecosystem was celebrating the recognition it had received, reflecting the court's newfound appreciation for small acts and the value of life. One senior courtier stepped forward, silver tendrils floating like ribbons in the air. "Princess, this human has done what we have not achieved in centuries, not through science, not through invention, but through care, attention, and perspective. Perhaps we should reconsider our own approach to knowledge and power. Perhaps we should learn to value life as he does." Lyra nodded. "Indeed, Captain Thorne, you have given us a legacy. The terrarium, and the lessons it carries, will remain with the Dominion. It will inspire our people to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to find wonder in simplicity, and to remember that even the smallest life holds meaning." Elias felt a warmth spread through him. Humans were often considered weak or insignificant in the galaxy, yet here, his small actions had left an enduring mark. It was not through conquest, nor through the display of strength, but through the very qualities that made humans unique: empathy, creativity, and the courage to nurture life. Lyra gestured toward the terrarium. "Captain Thorne, would you accept this token?" she said. A crystal floated gently toward him, glowing softly. "It records memories, reflections, and experiences. It will allow you to share what you have taught us with others and carry the Dominion's acknowledgement of your efforts. Consider it a bridge between our worlds." Elias reached out, carefully taking the crystal. As he did, it pulsed warmly in his hand, and he felt a subtle connection to the palace, to Lyra, and to the countless beings who had witnessed his small gift. He realized that this was more than a token. It was a symbol of respect, a recognition of humanity's potential to inspire and connect. "Thank you, Princess," Elias said softly. "I will treasure this, and I will honor the lessons of the Dominion." Lyra's gaze softened. "And we will treasure the lessons you have brought. Humans often underestimate the power of their own actions, yet you have reminded us that empathy, care, and attention are strengths that transcend species. Your presence has created a ripple that will endure." Elias looked around the hall at the courtiers. Some were smiling gently, some nodded thoughtfully, and some studied the terrarium and the crystal as if reflecting deeply on what they had learned. He realized that this moment would be remembered in the Dominion for years, perhaps even centuries. A single human had reminded one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations of a truth they had almost forgotten. The sun of the gas giant began to set, casting soft hues of violet and gold across the palace. The gardens below glowed in response, streams of light flowing between floating flowers and plants. Elias felt a profound sense of peace. He had come as an explorer, uncertain of his place among beings so advanced, yet he was leaving as a teacher, a connector, and a symbol of humanity's quiet strength. Lyra approached one final time. "Captain Thorn," she said, her voice filled with warmth, "your gift, your stories, and your care have left a mark on our hearts. You have shown us that life, no matter how small, deserves respect, that even a single individual, with thought and intention, can inspire change across worlds. Remember this, human. As you continue your journeys." Elias nodded. "I will, Princess. I will carry these lessons and share them wherever I go." She smiled. "And we will remember you, Captain Thorn. The Zolari will speak of this day for generations. Your presence has reminded us that the smallest gestures can have the greatest impact. Even in a galaxy full of wonders, humanity's heart shines brightly." As he prepared to depart, Elias looked one last time at the terrarium. It had begun as a humble gift, simple and fragile, but it had become a beacon, a living reminder that life, attention, and care mattered. The tiny ecosystem inside glowed softly, as if thanking him for sharing it, and he realized that this small gift had done more than survive. It had inspired reflection, connection, and respect. The courtiers and Lyra accompanied him to the docking platform. The palace floated silently above the swirling gas giant, reflecting the light of distant stars. Elias stepped onto the Aurora's edge, feeling a mixture of pride, humility, and anticipation. His journey among the Zolari had changed him, and he knew it had changed them as well. Princess Lyra approached the edge of the docking platform. "Captain Thorn," she said, her voice carrying a quiet authority, "may this crystal guide you, and may your example continue to inspire understanding between our worlds. The Dominion knows you its gratitude, and our people will remember the lessons you have shared." Elias nodded, holding the crystal carefully. "Thank you, Princess. I will honor your trust and the lessons of your people." As the airlock closed and the Aurora's edge prepared to launch, Elias looked back at the palace one final time. The floating gardens, streams of light, and glowing terraces seemed to wave farewell in their own unique way. He realized that what had started as a small, simple gift had created ripples far beyond his imagination. During the journey back, Elias reflected on the experience. Humans often felt small in the vastness of space, but he now understood that size and strength were not the only measures of worth. Thoughtfulness, empathy, and care could resonate across galaxies. Humanity's potential was not in power alone, but in its heart, and that heart had just left its mark on one of the most advanced civilizations in the universe. He smiled as he placed the terrarium carefully beside the crystal. The tiny ecosystem glowed softly, the flowers gently swaying, and the insects moving in intricate patterns. It was a reminder that even the smallest forms of life, when nurtured and respected, could inspire awe and understanding. Elias felt a quiet pride in being human. He had traveled far, faced uncertainty, and offered nothing more than a simple gift, a few stories, and the care of life itself. And yet, that small act had created connections that would endure. As the Aurora's edge jumped into light speed, leaving the Zolari Dominion behind, Elias looked at the stars with renewed purpose. Humanity had shown that it could inspire, teach, and touch the hearts of even the most advanced civilizations. And he knew that wherever humans went, their gifts of empathy, care, and creativity could leave a lasting mark on the universe. The terrarium's glow, mirrored by a crystal from Princess Lyra, reminded him that small gestures were never small. They were the seeds of change, the bridges between worlds, and the proof that humanity's quiet strength could shine brighter than the stars themselves. Elias leaned back in his pilot chair, feeling the gentle hum of the ship beneath him. For the first time, he understood the true power of humanity, not in weapons, not in technology, not in conquest, but in the ability to care, to create, and to inspire. And with that understanding, he smiled, ready for the adventures that awaited, carrying with him the pride, respect, and connection he had earned among the stars.